This is Corinne.
And this is Ayani.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, we're talking about the incredibly popular Korean drama, Crash Landing on You.
And we're joined by our friend and colleague, Minji Kang.
It's our first guest! What?
As a note, we do briefly discuss depression and suicidal ideation this episode, but we'll give you a heads up before we go into detail.
Don't forget to find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at SexLoveLit, and to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform.
And now, on with the show.
So we are super excited for this episode of Sex, Love, Literature today because we have our first special guest. Woo!
Yay!
This is so exciting. So listeners, we would like to introduce you to the future Dr. Minji Kang. So Minji, say hi, introduce yourselves. Who are you? Why are you here? Why did we rope you into talking about Chloe with us?
Hi, everyone. So I'm a big fan of SLL, and I've been listening for a while now. So I was really excited when Corinne and Ayani reached out to me, and I've been watching Korean dramas for a really long time now, and I love them. So I just got to talking with Corinne a little bit when she was, discussing her Korean drama love, and
by that, she means posting too much about it on Instagram, because that is what I do.
That's not too much, Corinne. I fully enjoy it. So keep them coming. And that's pretty much how I got introduced to Sex, Love, Lit. And I've listened to a lot of, your episodes as of now. So
thank you.
So, Minji, tell our listeners about yourself. What do you do? Well, actually, for a little bit of context, Minji is one of our colleagues at the University of Florida in the English department with us. And that's part of the reason that we know each other, beyond Corinne's K-drama obsession leaking its way onto the internet. But
True.
Minji, what do you study? What are you going to be a doctor of?
Yeah, I'm a fifth-year PhD student at the University of Florida. And I'm broadly studying race and gender. And more specifically, I study African American literature and Asian American literature. And even more specifically, it's contemporary slave narratives and museums about slavery in both the South Korean and American context.
You can join the heavy topic club that I'm in for our dissertations.
Minji also runs a very, very fun blog called Community Food Waves that I figured maybe we could plug a little bit here too. So tell us about Community Food Waves. What is that? Why are you doing that? What is it for?
Yeah, so Community Food Waves is all about supporting local businesses. And it pretty much started during the pandemic when I was just out to dinner at Alpin, one of my favorite places, with some friends, Lauren and Tyler. And we were just talking on the back patio about how things are going. And we just overheard some conversation with the owner there and some of her friends who are also business owners. So that's how we kind of got started about getting to talk about, how local businesses are doing and the kind of choices that they make in terms of the kind of produce they use and being environmentally friendly and conscious and paying their workers well. So I just had no idea about, all of the choices that they're making. And I just love food. So any kind of food, I will definitely be on that. So yeah, I just decided to tell some stories about food and just the behind the scenes kind of things that also go on beyond the food. So yeah, especially during the pandemic, local businesses definitely need more of our support. And so that's kind of how it got started.
Oh, that's excellent. And shout out to Alpen Bistro because their food is fantastic.
It's so good.
And their desserts. Oh, don't get me started.
Oh, yeah.
But so shifting then, I guess, to what we're actually talking about today, which is a specific Korean drama. So you said you've been watching K-dramas for forever, Minji. So what is your kind of then relationship to K-dramas? Like, I have talked about them every episode of this podcast, but I have only been watching them since July. So you know more about them than me. So like what is that like for you, I guess?
Yeah, so I just grew up watching K-dramas. My first one was Full House, which I think came out in 2004. So
Oh my
pretty
God, that's when I
long.
graduated from high school.
Yeah, I have a pretty long history with K-dramas. And I just remember back then watching him under the covers because my parents would kind of not allow me to watch those
Oh.
at the time. So I would just be under the covers, just like watching by myself in the dark. And it definitely, yeah, it definitely just helped me through, especially as I was going from, going to Korea and then studying here in America.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good way for me to keep hold of something from my roots and just,
Mm-hmm.
the Korean culture. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think I've just grown with Korean dramas, really.
That's so cool. I'm a little bit jealous that you have that continuity of like K-dramas. Because like the oldest one I've watched, I think, was My Love from the Star, which like is
Mhm.
only from like I think 2013. So like I haven't gone back that far in K-dramas, so I don't have some of the like classic touchstones when I'm watching things. So I don't always get all the references, but that's great.
But yeah, you are making your move. Like, you watched over 40. So yeah, I think you have a pretty good handle on it.
I gotta say though, the image of you like little hiding under your covers while watching K-dramas is super adorable, and I fully support you sharing that here with us today. Like, warms my heart just a bit. So, as we introduced, today we are going to be talking about Crash Landing on You, which I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, y'all, is definitely on the top, or at least in the top 3 or top 5 favorite K-dramas for the folks on this call. I know Corinne, and this was actually the first one that Corinne manhandled me into watching.
I have bullied multiple people into watching this show, and I am hopeful that doing a podcast on it will make even more people watch it.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I know for me, it's definitely one of the top that I've watched so far. Though, to be fair, all of the ones that I've watched have made me really, really happy. But there is something special about Crash Landing, which is why we're talking about it today. And though, Minji, I'm sorry, I think I assumed on your behalf, do you think Crash Landing is in like your top 5, if not of all time, then maybe of like the last couple of years?
Yeah, definitely. Crash Landing is pretty up there. I think it has such an interesting concept of exploring North
Mm-hmm.
Korea, and that just immediately caught my eye. And I've been a fan of Hyunbin from Secret Garden. That's pretty much when he roped me in. So yeah, I was definitely all for that.
And we will definitely be talking about him and his draw today, because I think we're all kind of here for Hyunbin.
Yes.
But to provide a little bit of an introduction to the show, for those of you that have not been roped into it yet, it is a very recent show. It aired from December 14th of 2019 through February 16th of 2020, and it was available in the US on Netflix, which is how Corinne and I'm assuming how Minji watched it too, so how we all watched it. It was wildly popular in South Korea and around the world, so this is kind of, and I think I've seen it on some lists too for kind of groundbreaking K-dramas, or like, not break the internet, that's not the term I want, but like it had international acclaim and international popularity. Which is also part of the reason we're talking about it today. So, to share a little bit of a summary from good old Asian Wiki, Yoon Seri is an heiress to a conglomerate in South Korea. One day, while paragliding, an accident caused by strong winds, or a tornado, which is very, very Wizard of Oz, by the way, leads Yoon Seri to make an emergency landing in North Korea. There, she meets Ri Jung-hook, who is a North Korean army officer. He tries to protect her and hide her, and soon the two start to fall in love. So we talked a little bit about the fact that Crash Landing is definitely up there in terms of our favorites, but what are our feelings about this show beyond it just being like fantastic and we love the cast? Like, what are some emotional responses here? Let's get affective for a little bit. What about this show makes us fall in love with it?
I know so I'll, I guess, jump in first here, but I think
rock out.
part of it for me, so this was only the second Korean drama I ever saw. The first one I watched was Cinderella and the Four Knights, which is like very goofy and funny, and I liked it, but it's like not necessarily anything super special. But with Crash Landing on You, I just felt so many feelings.
Girl.
So like with K-dramas, the way I kind of rank their emotional impact, or there are like different degrees of crying that I do. With many K-dramas, I like tear up during them at some point because they're very good at like pulling on your emotional heartstrings. There are ones that I like full on cry while I'm watching them. And there are a few where I cry sometimes when I'm just like thinking about them. And Chloe was definitely on that level. There are just so many feelings in this show, and it's so emotionally impactful that like I kept like living in it, and it lived rent free in my head for a long time after I finished watching it. What about you guys?
Yeah, I definitely feel that with all the feels, which, I feel like sometimes you need an outlet for your tears and your feelings. And this drama is definitely it. It's a place for you to cry a lot and also for you to laugh,
Yes.
like there were times when I was laughing and crying and probably doing both at the same time, like if that's even possible. So yeah, you just go through a roller coaster of emotions. And yeah, although that might not sound super appealing, it just, it really is. And only this drama could probably do that. So
yeah, no, I 100% get what you mean, because for me, and we were talking a little bit about this last night, but one of the things about Crash Landing is that like it's so well put together that your emotions are being manipulated, but you almost don't care. And it's like you can sometimes see it coming, but it still hits you like a freight truck. I was watching some episodes in isolation to prepare for our podcast, and literally I just was like, I'll watch episode 9. And I was weeping just watching episode 9 because of how the story kind of stuck with me and the characters stayed with me. I didn't even need the buildup, so to speak, of the story to make me like start crying about how much they love each other and how difficult the circumstance is. So like emotionally it registers, but also just from a storytelling standpoint, the fact that I can just jump in randomly, and still, one, be able to pick up very easily from my memories what's happening, but two, still have that emotional resonance. It's just, it's a phenomenally well put together show. So when we were trying to decide what K-drama to talk about, and we were like, Crash Landing, everyone was kind of just like, yeah. This is the way to go. So before we get too deep into our emotions, because we have a bunch and we're going to have a lot of emotions while we're talking today, hopefully, I hope we're not going to cry on the podcast. That would be a first. But also, if it happens, I'm not editing it out. You guys are going to get the raw, like, tears. It's going to happen. But why don't we introduce the characters so that some of our listeners can kind of have an understanding of who's on the playing field here.
So we have sort of 4 main characters. We have the A couple and we have the B couple. And so part of the A couple, we have Yoon Seri, who is played by Son Ye-jin, and she is the rich South Korean heiress, and she has an amazing wardrobe. She is super
amazing.
Sassy. She's so funny. Like that actress she's so good. Like I think I've just seen her in Something in the Rain outside of this, but like Son Ye-jin is amazing. And then we have the other half of the A couple, that is Captain Hyeok, played by Hyun Bin, who is very hot. And just we might as well put that explicitly. That is part of the draw of this show. But then also we have in our B couple, Seo Dan, who is played by Seo Ji-hee. Sorry if I mispronounced that a little bit there. And Gu Seung-jun, who is played by Kim Jung-hyun. And Seo Dan is originally Captain Ri Jung-hyuk's arranged fiance. She is North Korean. She is Also, like, she grew on me over time. But she is the daughter of a rich department store owner. So she is sort of in the upper echelon of North Korean society, and she's been studying abroad in Russia, studying music. And then the second half of the B couple is Gu Seung-jun, alias Alberto Gu.
Alberto.
And he is a con man who was on the run because he conned one of Yoon Seri's brothers, and he is hiding out the length of the statute of limitations in North Korea. And we find out various things about his relationship with Yoon Seri's family and Yoon Seri, and like these four characters are very, very tangled up. They have tangled backstories.
Yeah.
But so there are the four mains we're going to talk about, but we are also going to talk about a bit of the ensemble cast, most of which Minji will introduce. But their families are sometimes a little bit important. So in particular, Yoon Seri has her father and her mother, who is not biological because Yoon Seri was illegitimate, which is a big piece of tension. And she has two older brothers who are assholes. And so her two brothers and two sister-in-laws are jerks, but they are important to the story. And I will turn it over to Minji now.
Right. So on top of that, we have some minor characters, but those minor characters are also really important. So we have Jo Chul-gang, who is the big bad, antagonist figure here, and he is the enemy of particularly Lee Jung-hyuk. So he's the one that creates a lot of havoc and problems and tries to kill pretty much a lot of the main characters at some point.
He really does.
Yeah. And this guy just never dies. I feel like, yeah, he is resilient. Yeah. And then also we have Lee Jung-hyuk's squad. So I like how they are referred to as the ducklings. And we have Pyo Chi-soo, who is the grumpy uncle. He is pretty mean most of the time, but he really grows on you. He was one of my favorite characters, actually. And he's all about critiquing capitalism, not falling into the capitalistic gains, but he ends up being a really enjoyable character. And we also have Kim Joo-muk, who is another duckling, but he is really familiar with K-dramas, and he pretty much acts as the translator to kind of translate to the audience, but also the other characters about various conventions that the K-drama industry uses. And yeah, he is really cute. He's adorable. We also have Park Kwang-bum, who is the AKA hot duckling. So he's very attractive. That's pretty much all you need to know about him. And we also have Kim Eun-dong, who is the baby duckling. So he's the youngest one of the squad, and he's the definition of innocent and just someone that you want to protect. He's just this precious little duckling. And also we have Manbok, who joins the ducklings later, and he is part of the intelligence committee. So he spends most of his time being in secret, hiding out, and listening to the various towns members. And he ends up joining Lee Jung-hyuk's squad. And yeah, I think he has a very important role towards the end of the drama. And of course, we also have the lady squad. So yeah, we have the North Korean market ladies who play a big part in the North Korean scenes. And these ladies are hilarious. They are, just phenomenal actresses, and they just give another level to the drama. So yeah, each one of them, we probably don't have time to go into detail about each of them, but they are just really, really fun characters. They add a lot of personality, and they really end up just really having a great relationship with Yoon Seri. So yeah, definitely love these ladies.
Yeah. And I know personally that there are some of those actresses that we are now following through other dramas because we
Mhm.
love them so much. So whenever we see them
Mhm.
somewhere else, we get super excited. We're like, oh,
Mhm.
it's one of the ladies. It's one of the ladies. So yeah.
So just as a
Yes.
note, we know that was a lot of characters for you to keep track
Yes.
of. So to think of how to hang your head around them. That was a weird phrase, but I'm going to go with it. So just think of it as we have our four mains, making up the A couple and the B couple. We have the big bad guy, and then we have the different constellations of characters around them that are their families, and then we have Captain Ree's squad, and then we have the North Korean market ladies. So if you think of them in those groups, it will be helpful to keep track of them. And I will also add, like, much like in It's Okay to Not Be Okay, where although we
Mhm.
didn't have time to talk about the whole ensemble cast, the ensemble cast of this drama is one of its strengths.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that makes it so entertaining. It's one of the things that makes it last 16 episodes and keep you hooked, because there is
Mhm.
always
Mhm.
something happening with someone, and none of the characters are just like straight types. They all have
Mhm.
different layers of nuance, and their relationships to each other and to the main characters are all really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Why don't we put our teacher hats on for a second? One of the things that we kind of had a little bit of pre-discussion about, but we thought was really fascinating and kind of wanted to bring to all of you is the idea of who this drama is for, right? The fact that the
Mhm.
three of us really latched onto it for a lot of different reasons, it made us kind of question, okay, who are they actually trying to attract with this drama? Who's the main audience? Is there a main audience, and what that main audience might be? So to throw it out there first, this is a South Korean drama, right? So
Mhm.
are we thinking that South Korea is kind of the main audience for this show, even though it's on US Netflix?
Yeah, I would think so, that South Korea is definitely the main audience. And it's interesting that it was produced by TVN, which is a cable channel. So
Oh.
yeah, it wasn't part of the main, free,
Mm.
more well-known channels, but it's really interesting because it gives you a look into North Korea, which,
Mm-hmm.
most South Koreans do not have any depth knowledge about that part of Korea. So yeah, it really just, triggers the curiosity and fascination that even South
Hmm.
Koreans have about North Korea, and maybe even dismantle some of the prejudice and preconceived notions that we have
Mm.
about North Korea as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I found really interesting as somebody who's part of like the international audience, right? Is in our media, North Korea is painted in a very, very particular kind of way. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy sometimes, I think, if you're not careful, to collapse a people and a government and a mentality into something that's flat. So, something that I think Chloe does that's really interesting is kind of give this peer, this look into North Korean people, right? Not just like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
what is the head of the country doing? What are the wealthiest people in the country doing? But like what is life like for the people on the ground? And I don't think that's something, I mean, you're saying that, that South Koreans would see, but I don't think that's something that most people in a lot of international audiences would think about seeing on a regular basis. So yeah, I think it really has an interesting kind of broad approach in that way, in that it humanizes
Mm-hmm.
a country that I think in a lot of ways our media tries to dehumanize, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So, an interesting question though, because I know we talked about this a little bit, but is koi the kind of thing that North Koreans would actually get to see? I remember there was some, I don't want to say there was some drama that's a little derisive, but that both folks in North Korea and folks in South Korea were kind of like looking down on the show as propaganda. I think you told me that, Corinne. There was
Yeah,
like an
I
article you
remember
read.
I like read and Minji would probably have a better view on this than I would, but I remember reading an article that was like, oh yeah, like the liberal people, some of the liberal people in South Korea were like, this is nonsense. They are making North Korea look too good. And then North Korea released a non-specific statement. So they weren't specifically talking about the drama, but about how they were like, this is like an inappropriate depiction of our country or something. I don't remember the details, but like it's really interesting when people on both sides don't like something.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting because the drama has to walk this fine line between humanizing North Korea and really giving personality behind what we just know from a mainstream audience. But also that humanizing can be detrimental in that if it covers over bigger issues like the poverty and the food shortages that we're not really focused on as much. So I think the drama really tries to get into some of the deeper layers, but also the main characters are pretty much really upper class, really wealthy people. And so we don't necessarily get as much of the look into the ordinary, citizens as we probably want to. Yeah, but there's also only so much that you can do in 16 episodes. And this drama was widely popular for South Korea as well. So I really hope that North Koreans can also get access to it somehow.
on the down low.
On the down low,
on the
right?
DL, of course. Yes.
So one thing really quickly that I was also kind of thinking about and remembering from the first time I watched this drama is it also made me think about, because it's depicting, like a communist fascist state. Like it made me think of another show that we've mentioned on the podcast before, but not talked about, what The Americans, which like looks at two Soviet spies living in the United States in the 80s. And it's fictional, but also sort of based on a real story. Crashing on You is not based on a real story. But I do think it's interesting to think about who it wants you to root for. Because I remember watching The Americans, and like I think the reason it like brought that to mind for me a lot is like when you call people a comrade and when you like have that sort of view of like the leader. So I come at communism and fascism a lot more from an Eastern European studies angle. So like a lot of what I like picked up on in Chloe came from that. But like it's so interesting thinking about who it wants you to root for. Like we love the North Korean market ladies. They're great, but like we're also rooting for North Koreans and like we're rooting for like a romance. But it's also interesting then that like so Cho Chal-gong is like the main villain, but also like Chinese gangsters commit a lot of the violence. So like where it situates, I guess, different ethnic and cultural groups on this sort of spectrum of like good characters and bad characters you root for, characters you hate. Like I think the character I hate the most, honestly, is Seri's second oldest brother because he sucks.
Yeah, he's the worst.
So there's, I think, this question of who you root for and where they come from, and I think this drama is playing with in a way that, like, if you want to think of North Korea as a whole as the enemy, this drama like undercuts that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things they're definitely doing, just to kind of echo what you said, is show that there are, quote unquote, and I'm putting huge like quotations around this, but good people and bad people everywhere. You know what I mean? And of course, human beings have more nuance than that, but it's kind of saying that we can, love the North Korean market ladies just as much as we can't stand Seri's older brother, right? That just because of where they're from or where they were born doesn't mean that we automatically have an allegiance to them or an alignment to them. And I mean, he was really the worst. Like, I don't know if we're going to have enough time to like talk about him today, but like we watched the finale again yesterday and he just made me so mad. Like I stopped crying for a little bit just to be like, he's the fucking worst.
Yes.
Also, a quick note on spoilers before we sort of dive into our discussion of the specifics of the show. We are going to be spoiling some details. Like we obviously spoiled like who ends up together, but also like that's like pretty clear from like the beginning, so that's not that much of a spoiler. But we are going to put off our discussion of exactly how things land at the end until the last part of the podcast episode. So if you haven't seen it, you can listen to us talk. If you want to go in spoiler free, it's already a little too late, but you can listen to us. You can listen to the beginning of the podcast, but we really do recommend, if you haven't seen it and you want to, that you don't listen to us talk about the conclusion because and we're also going to talk about why the emotional investment is so huge.
Right.
But part of why the emotional investment for me was so huge is because I truly could not see a happy ending that was possible for these characters, because political situation is just so impossible.
Yeah.
But we will give you a spoiler warning before we start talking about the conclusion.
Yeah. And actually, not to just like steamroll over what you're saying, because that's very important. There will be a spoiler warning. But just to pick up on something you said, though, one of the things, if we're thinking about emotional investment, is the fact that the stakes were so high in this show. Like, I don't think anything else that I've kind of watched during the pandemic that wasn't like an action sequence or wasn't some like out of control science fiction thing. Like, nothing has had quite the same kind of stakes as this, right? Seri, when she's in North Korea, is under constant threat of being found out, being thrown in jail, being murdered, you know? Like, the show, this is one of the reasons why it's an emotional roller coaster, right? Is that even though you're kind of getting invested in the romance and the relationship that's building, like, people can die at any minute, and it's just a lot. And the fact that they make you care about so many people kind of expands those feelings. So now it's not just that you're worried about Yoon Seri and Lee Jung-hyuk. You're also worried about the ducklings. You're also worried about Alberto. You're also worried about Dan. And it's just like, how many people can I be worried about their imminent death at a time? How can I hold all this at once? So it's just wild to think about how they managed to balance all of those stakes at once. Emotions.
Yes.
I know one of the examples that like I give a lot, and part of the reason I enjoyed watching K-dramas so much and why I've become so deeply obsessed is, especially at the beginning, I didn't necessarily know the genre convention, so I didn't always know the stakes. And that this is the second K-drama I watched where the stakes were so high. Like, I didn't, like, in the first episode, Seri literally runs through a minefield, and I did not know how worried I had to be that she was going to step on a mine. So, like, the stakes they're wild in so many ways. But yeah, what do you think, Minji?
Yeah, I think also it being North Korea as the main setting, that really just has, you know, the idea of danger already built into it. And we're constantly worried of what's going to happen if she's caught. You know, she might be killed, but she also might be tortured. And, you know, like we really get that kind of danger within us as well. So yeah, I was feeling nervous for her, honestly, for most of the drama. And yeah, like we also, I think a lot of the drama is also about sacrifice. So various characters sacrificing themselves for another person or for the group. So it's like if one person gets caught, then the whole group is now in danger and might not make it to the country. So yeah, there's all of this bigger, large scale sacrifice and what comes with that really gets us nervous and just worried for these characters.
Well, and building on that as well, like when you think about like what is a happy ending for these characters, or like what would be like a resolution, like we have maybe shifting a little bit then into talking about our main couple, like for Yoon Seri and Ri Jung-hyuk, like they have this budding relationship, but the goal is to get Yoon Seri back home. So the goal that they are working towards for at least the first half of the show will lead to their separation. So like it's just so fraught because like Seri has to leave. She can't stay in North Korea, like no matter like what, like that, she can't do that. That's not like that won't work. And that is so, I think part of why the emotional investment is so huge is because it's so complicated. There's not like a neat happy ending that like is easily sorted through.
Yeah. I know one of the things, honestly, that would kind of work me into some of my crying fervor, right, is thinking about how impossible their love is, but still how much they love each other. And just even thinking about that would, in a moment, get me started on like the crying train, you know? And I think that's part of the reason why the couple is so compelling, is that they really sell us on this growing love that they have for each other, but we as an audience know their love feels impossible, right? It's like the most impossible setup for a relationship. And one of the things that we noted is that there's this lingering kind of conversation through our A couple about saying goodbye and separation and missing somebody, you know. And I think it's, again, kind of just thinking to what makes Koi so great, the way that they're able to kind of hang this budding romance side by side with this kind of constant feeling of separation and missing and longing, which is really kind of beautiful.
Also, for a little bit of context for people who maybe have not seen the show.
Oh, well, they should watch it then.
But so the way that Yoon Seri and Ri Jeung-hyuk meet each other, Yoon Seri lands in the demilitarized zone where Ri Jeung-hyuk is patrolling. He finds her hanging from a tree in her paraglider, and it's so funny. It shouldn't be funny, but like it's so funny when they meet. Like it's an amazing meet cute. But then she tries to escape, accidentally ends up in North Korea instead of South Korea in an amazing chase sequence. She is so fast. She is an amazing runner.
So
that was
fast.
delightful. Yes. But then she finds a village. She thinks she's in South Korea, and there's this sort of amazing Wizard of Oz not in Kansas anymore moment where she like sees like pictures of like the North Korean leader and like sees like the school children and sees like I think a donkey in a cart and like is like, what is happening? Where
the tofu
am I?
man?
Yeah. And then Ri Jeung-hyuk finds her, saves her for the first time from Chocheol-gong, and then from there he's through negotiation he starts trying to get her back home. But like through a number of mishaps this is happening, their relationship is also growing. And I think one of the things that is really interesting to watch and like sort of wonder about is like at what point did these characters start to like each other? At what point did they start to love each other? At what point did it become like, oh, this is a person who if they were in my life would make it better, and then to like, this is a person who I cannot imagine living without. And I think there's really layered performances going on from these actors because there is so much left unsaid much of the time, but like you can see it in their performances and like as these characters are like realizing, I don't know, the potential in their relationship. Yeah. What do y'all think?
Oof, I don't know. I'm just feeling it in my heart. So I'm gonna be quiet for a second.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the journey that Lee Jung-hyuk and Yoon Seri take together is so intricate because they go from being complete strangers and then Seri being such a liability to him. And he pretty much thinks of her as a nuisance. He's like, you
and
need
he's
to
not
go.
Wrong.
Yeah, like he's not wrong, you know, like, yeah, his whole career, his whole life, his family's life depends on her being gone. And so he thinks of her as a nuisance. He's trying to kind of get rid of her. But I love how she just like sees him and she's like, oh, you're kind of my type, you know, like it's like, I know that I'm in North Korea and I might die, but you're kind of my type. And so, yeah, she immediately just tells him, like, if this were a different circumstance, you know, maybe we can meet up in a different time. So, yeah, I just love how she kind of initiates the feelings almost, you know? And she has those like moments.
Oh, yeah. That moment is so fun. Like he's literally standing on a mine.
Yeah, on a landmine.
That. And he's like, and so Aoni and I are working off the English subtitles on Netflix here. But like, he's like, how could you make a joke in a moment like this?
Yeah.
And like their characters are so, it's interesting how well they play off of each other because Yoon Seri is so warm and funny, and she's been sort of like an ice queen in like her South Korean running her own company, like kicking butt, taking names. Like she's great, but like she's so charismatic and hilarious. But Ri Jeung-hyuk is like very taciturn, very he doesn't smile very much, but like when he smiles, it's at her.
And it's electric.
Yeah.
But like seeing them both sort of soften as a result of the other person, despite the absolute insanity of their circumstances, is really, really, really entertaining and addicting to watch.
Yeah, I think one of the moments or one of the through lines that really sticks with me in kind of relationship to what you're saying is Seri's relationship to food. Because Seri, she said she was picky, but I think this is a little bit more than picky. She would only eat a bite of something, and if she did not like that first bite, she would not continue to eat. Right? So one of the things that happens throughout the show is Lee Jung-hyuk cooks for her and makes her noodles and is giving her all these fresh vegetables. And they kind of develop a relationship over eating and over food. And then kind of food and cooking and having these things for each other becomes kind of a symbol of their relationship and of their bond. Like the fact that she buys him a tomato plant, you know what I mean? Even though it's a plant, it's something to grow. It's still a food thing, you know? And their relationship to food kind of changes how she looks at food for the rest of the show. That might sound like a silly thing to kind of pick up on, but the writers and the director decided that this needs to be a through line of her character. So it's something that shows up, I would say at least maybe once an episode, unless some really crazy stuff is going down, but at least once an episode, there's something happening with Seri and eating, right? And how she eats and what she'll eat and flashbacks to her not eating, you know, so yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely want to jump in since we're talking about food.
Yes.
I love that they have such a contrast between the foods that they eat too. So in North Korea, we have more of like the natural foods. Like we have them with potatoes that they roasted and them cooking in a traditional, what's called a gamasot, so like a stone pot thing. And then yeah, and so Seri, who had all the decadent food in the world, is and didn't really like it, is so captivated by this natural food that she has in North Korea. Like that scene where they're eating the clams and they put the soju in there. Oh, that was beautiful. That just made me crave some drink. Yeah, but that kind of thing, just that it wasn't really about the, you know, how good or how fancy the food was, but it was because she was with good company that the food tasted better. And so that is, I think, emphasized by the food. It's that, like it's all about having connection and having love and having family and sharing that food with the family.
Oof, yeah, that really resonates in a pandemic when we're like not spending time with people. Like,
exactly. Yeah, I miss eating with people for sure.
For real. I think the last big meal I had was probably Christmas 2019, maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's not linger in the sad places. But there's so much to love about this main couple that, and I think this is worth mentioning, that the actors are now dating. So they also felt the chemistry. And we on this podcast fully support their happiness.
That is the official SLL stance.
The official stance. Like, beyond the post we make about this episode, we support, what is it? Is it
Binjin?
Binjin. Okay. I was like, Union? That's not right. But were there any things that we thought were not compelling about their relationship? Things that fell flat for us? Because it sounds like we're mostly on board. But
yeah, there was something. So it's pretty common in K-dramas for the male lead to be very protective and for him to kind of even be a little aggressive sometimes. You know, we have the famous wrist grab where he just grabs her wrists and, you know, drags her out of a room, which I personally am not a fan of. But we kind of see that with Lee Jung-hyuk as well, because Lee Jung-hyuk is definitely the protective type, right? He's the guard dog and he's the bodyguard. And so we see that kind of happening here. But I guess the reason why I could stand that was because Seri also kind of reciprocated that. Like, he took a bullet for her, and then she takes a bullet for him, you know? So I like how the drama kind of has the female take a lot of the sacrifice too. Like, she's in control and she can also protect him just as much as he protects her.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent kind of, maybe inversion is not the right word, but the fact that there is that mirroring between how they look out for each other was something that I really appreciated about their relationship. Wait a minute, we're supposed to be talking about things that didn't work for us.
So
and she just threw me back in. I was like, yeah, I love that. Yeah, wait a minute.
So something that I think, I mean, along that, in that same vein, something that did work for me that very easily could not have, is I'm always very aware of like the power difference between different characters, and it is potentially hugely problematic for there to be this love story that takes place, like, at least in the first half of the show, largely in North Korea, where he holds Yoon Seri's life in his hands, like, and that there is like potential elements of Stockholm syndrome. This is something, if it were to happen in real life, I would be hugely skeptical of.
Yeah.
But some things that the show also does, I think, to help mitigate that, like, it's aware of that risk. Like, it acknowledges how bonkers the situation is. Like, I think Gusung Joon like says that specifically, that this might be something that is happening. So like it goes a long way for me when, like, in narrative something happens where like the characters acknowledge how nutty something is. And it also matters, I think, that they don't, and Ayani pointed this out in an earlier conversation that we had, where like they have like a couple of romance tropey type kisses, but he doesn't really like kiss her or make a move until Seri has stepped over the border into South Korea, where like she is in a position of greater power again. So what did y'all think of the power dynamics going on there? Did they work for you? How did that work from your points of view?
I think you make excellent points that it could have been a really uncomfortable and problematic situation that I would 100%, if this was real life, I'd have been like, I don't know. But I think in a way, one, because they set us up with this kind of Wizard of Oz sheen. I don't know if that's the right term, but like we're coming to it in a way that it is a little bit fantastical, right? That she blows away because a tornado comes and flies across the border, right? There is already this sense, this air of fantasy to it. But also I think they do a very good job of making Lee Jung-hyuk a quote unquote upstanding gentleman, right? I almost wasn't worried that he would take advantage of her, if that makes sense. And I as a viewer trusted him to do the right thing because of what they were leading me to do and what they were leading me to believe. But also, Seri really kept a strong sense of herself and her wits about herself throughout the entire situation, right? And it's not that there were ever times that she didn't get nervous or scared or whatever, but like the way she would think on her feet, how she developed these different kinds of relationships, she seemed, even though there was this, he's in a position of power, not over her, but in their community, right? I don't know. I didn't feel like, one, he was hoarding it over her, or two, that she wasn't his equal, if that makes sense. And I know for me, a lot of times when I have problems with power dynamics, it's when there's definitively a difference in, I guess, equality, which maybe I'm just defining power differential, but like they felt like equals to me in the way that they were cast and shown and presented in a way that wouldn't work if this was like a super 100% all the time serious narrative into taking place in real life, you know?
Well, that also, I think, something that this drama does really well, or that I found very entertaining, that sort of reminds you of the unreality of it, is how much it plays with romance tropes. So, like, we have, like, the fake out make out. We have, there's only one bed. That is my personal favorite romance trope. But like, and then there are so many. I recommend as a drinking game, or maybe not, keeping track of like how many romance tropes are used in this drama. But it also has the like meta aspect of the K-drama loving duckling who would then like comment on what was happening through the lens of South Korean dramas. Like there's also the like fake engagement trope that's used, which is so delightful. That's another one of my very favorite tropes.
That's
but, like,
a good one.
But like then when he's like, oh my goodness, like this happens in South Korean dramas all the time, and then the other ducklings are like, well, like what happens then? And he says the drama gets more interesting. Which is
I mean, he was right.
He was right.
Yeah,
he was very right. But why don't we, I know we love them, but why don't we move away from the Riri couple just for a second? Because you talked a little bit about the drama getting more interesting. And one of the things that it does is our lovely Captain is already engaged to somebody when he starts falling in love with Seri. So now might be a good time to just think a little bit about Seodan and who I call Alberto because it just stuck to me as such a... Not that the name was ridiculous, but when he was like, my name is Alberto Gu, I was like, why Alberto?
Also, like, they went with Alberto for his, like, British identity.
Yeah.
Like, Alberto, very, very British.
So I just, from now on, when I see him, I go, Alberto. So that's, yeah. But why don't we think about our B couple for a little bit? Because I think if we're, sex love literature, I think they deserve a little bit of the limelight here as well. So I will say, when Corinne bullied me into watching this show, it was actually through was it like a deal or a bet that you made with my spouse, Andrew?
Yes.
It was some kind of thing. So she had us watch it. I was just collateral damage here, but we all kind of watched it together. And Andrew was not as invested or moved by the B couple. He didn't find them as compelling or as engaging as our Riri group. So what did you guys think about that? Did you like Seodan and our friend Alberto, or were you not as compelled?
I didn't like Seodan in the beginning because obviously she comes out just when Yoon Seri and Lee Jung-hyuk are getting really close and she's about to shake things up, So I was kind of annoyed with her. But she didn't really seem actively out to sabotage them as much as I thought. And I feel like that was probably because she had a lot of pride and she had a lot of power herself, being this daughter of a really wealthy department store owner.
Yeah.
And so, she kind of could stand on herself. It's just that she also was infatuated by the very handsome Lee Jung-hyuk. So
I get it.
I couldn't blame her, right? I was like, I get that you want that man. It's just that he doesn't want you. I'm sorry. So I really felt bad for her. Like I was like, this is a sucky situation. Like you went all the way, there, you come back, you're engaged for 10 years.
10 years, man.
And you come back and he's with a different girl, shacked up. No, I would not be able to tolerate that. I would be like, we're done. But she was a little bit annoying, but I fully understood her. And towards the end, when she gets involved with Alberto, they become one of pretty important. I would say that they were my favorites as well, just because their relationship is just so interesting and how he's completely at her mercy. It's like Lee Jung-hyuk and Yoon Seri, but like opposite, because he's hiding out and then he needs Seodan's help. So I feel like the power dynamics were really interesting there. And she's just a really compelling, independent boss woman, which I fully enjoyed.
Yes.
Well, and something that is so interesting, I think, about these characters, and the way they're used narratively, is they are originally, as you say, set up as an impediment to our A couple's relationship. Like Seodan is the fiance, and she has this one-sided love going on. Alberto Gu, like, sets up Yoon Seri a little bit by mistake, but like to be assassinated, which is like, which is like bad. That's a problem.
Is it now?
But like I can see then, like the narrative I think uses them once our ducklings and our main couple leave the country to also keep us anchored in what is happening in North Korea still.
Yeah.
So like, so it doesn't become this drama that is, although we sort of have the first half, which is largely in North Korea, and the second half, which is largely in South Korea, we still have like one foot in both places.
Yeah.
And I historically have a soft spot for B couples, I've realized, because I think they're allowed to be a lot goofier than A couples. Like there can always be something that's just like a little bit weird about them, which I generally very enjoy. But like, because there does have to be this rehabilitation of their characters where they go from being, if not the villain, certainly an obstacle to characters that we want to root for. It worked for me, but it worked for me better the second and third times I watched this show because I already liked them when I watched it from the beginning, instead of having to sort of do this 180 in where I placed them on the like good bad spectrum.
That's interesting. And I was going to tease you a little bit and say, I think this might be the only time that you also didn't have second male lead syndrome. Though that might have changed now since we've seen the actor in other dramas, because we're watching Mr. Queen.
He's grown on me so much.
He's so great. But I think you make a valid point here, is that all of us were on our second rewatch of this show, right? And I think having the knowledge that we have coming back to it changes perhaps our reactions to some characters, because we've already created a sense of warmth for them. So we might like Dan and Alberto more coming back, or see things that we didn't pick up on before because we're like, oh yes, he does look at her that way when they're getting absolutely trashed, or when she's getting trashed, I should say. She's the one that has a little bit of a drinking problem. Yeah. So I do think it's worth thinking about how multiple watches can actually change your reaction to other characters. And your feelings about them. Because I know there were some characters in the beginning that I was more interested in, because I was like, oh, they seem intriguing, that by the end I couldn't stand. And now this time coming in, I was like, oh, it's that bitch right there. Like I already, had my feelings made up about them. So yeah, excellent point. So we spent a lot of time thinking about romantic relationships, but love is not just for couples, right? So one of the things that the show really sits with a lot and spends a lot of its how long is the runtime? Because I would just say 16 hours, but sometimes
I think
those
it's
episodes
like 24
stretch.
hours. It's so long.
But in its day-long hour runtime is found family and community. Seri, when she's in North Korea, builds these relationships that are deep, loving relationships with the North Korean ladies and with the ducklings. But we also have questions about her family back in South Korea. There's like so much going on here with love and family and community that I think it would behoove us to sit with for a bit. So I know I threw out a couple of those there, but are there any places in particular you guys would like to start in thinking about like some of these non-romantic love relationships? That was a mouthful, but
I think it makes sense maybe to start with the ducklings.
Sure.
Because they are such a foundational part of the show. And so like when we're thinking about melodramas and melodramatic tropes, like there is more hope perhaps for like when Seri goes back to South Korea, there's still a significant chunk of the drama left. So I was like pretty sure that like Seri and Hyuk were going to find a way to see each other again. But like when she says goodbye to the ducklings, like this group of men with whom she's formed like really strong friendships, and where she's both sort of like, depending on how old they are, like an older sister or almost mother relationship with some of them. Like when she says goodbye to them, it always felt more like a goodbye to me, and was one of the things that was most heart-wrenching because there is
Mm.
less, part of the difficulty is like, even if the impossible happens and she finds a way to be with Hyeok, she probably can't see the ducklings again. And that,
Yeah.
and like
Mhm.
she's going back to South Korea to be alone, but like here in like North Korea, she has people that she loves that love her and like want her to be safe. And
Mhm.
that's part of why I think it's so emotionally compelling. Yeah, what do y'all think?
Yeah, I felt the same way with her and the North Korean ladies too,
Mhm.
because when she leaves them, she's very heartbroken and she knows that she's not going to see them again.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just really sad that once she leaves, there's this whole community that she's going to leave behind.
Right.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and so I think that's where kind of the K beauty kicks in, because Seri makes the creams or the makeup in the shape of the North Korean ladies, So yeah, I feel like she keeps up a connection with them in that way, like using her makeup products
Yeah.
and all of that. But I guess she can't really do that with the ducklings. So yeah, that
Yeah.
part was really
Yeah.
sad.
And also, maybe circling back a bit to like how she even sort of forms a relationship with these people. Like one of the things that, like thinking about the North Korean market ladies, like they originally don't like Seri very much,
Yeah.
like
That's right.
because they think she's uppity. She is
Mhm.
I
pretending to be
mean,
part of Division 11, and they're
Mhm.
also all hot for Ri Jung Hyuk because he is hot. So
because obviously,
that's
right? Yeah.
correct.
Right.
But when like they think she's his fiance, they're like, they're like kind of in their feelings about it. But then when Seo
Mhm.
Dan shows up and says that she's his fiance, they are like ride or die for Seri and like show up
Yes.
at like Ri Jung Hyuk's house when he's not there, like in the middle of the night with fish and beer, I think,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and like are like, yeah, like that bitch, like, and they like have her back immediately, which like it was very familiar to me, and the way like the way communities of women can like support each other and like be
And
for there
rally.
and like rally to support someone like when they're down, like that
Mm-hmm.
base of their relationship was so, I mean, it was so compelling to me and also funny and bright. Well, yeah.
No, I
Mm-hmm.
think you're like 100% spot on with that. And honestly, I think it was a thing for me that was charming about both Seti's relationship with the ducklings and with the North Korean ladies is how they kind of had each other's back and would rally for each other, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be a little silly, but like I think it was kind of nice to show both her bonds with kind of the military men and the North Korean women. It wasn't just like
Mm-hmm.
she had just a community of women, but there was a variety of people that she was developing these bonds with that weren't romantic. So kind of just thinking about the breadth and the depth of friendship and how that can take on a variety of different forms was something that I
Mm-hmm.
really really liked. And if I don't think this is a spoiler since we already talked about the creams that she made with the North Korean ladies pictures on the box. But the name of that brand, and I'm going to butcher the word, I always do, but it's Saudade, which is a Portuguese word, which means, if I'm remembering correctly, kind of like a nostalgic longing for something you can never have again or something that you can never return to. And I personally think it's like one of the most beautiful words that we don't have a translation for in English because it like evokes such a real emotional feeling that I feel like most people have felt before. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that that's kind of interwoven into these groups of relationships, that these are people that she loves, and perhaps a time that was perilous, but also she developed these beautiful relationships that she can never return to again and that she can never go back to again. So it's just, yeah, it's a lot. But I
Mm-hmm.
think those two sets of relationships to me were in particular very beautiful in thinking about how deep and important different kind of friendship relationships can be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also maybe also circling back to our very beginning conversation, like that there are all these North Korean characters that are developed and layered, like also plays a big part in the drama showing us North Korea not just as a fascist state, but also as like a place where real people live.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and where
Mm-hmm.
they make kimchi and where they buy tofu and where they do laundry and go to the
Mm-hmm.
market, and like it's a real place. It's not just like it's not imaginary, despite like the elements of fantasy that the drama is playing with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess thinking about found family, one of the things that Seri has to deal with over the course of the show is her not so wonderful birth family, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 6 people kind of in her immediate family, right? Her
Mhm.
dad, her mom, her 2 elder brothers, and their wives. And she has kind of fluctuating relationships with all of them. I think they all pretty much start out in a bad place when in the first episode, right? Her dad is getting released from jail on probation. Also, real quick, that opening was so extra and was so very different than from what the rest of the show was about,
Mhm.
right? Because you think it's like, oh, there's going to be this takeover of the business and there's going to be this interfamily squabble. Nope, we're sending her to North Korea. That was just a fake out. And it's not that it's not important to the rest of the narrative, but it's not like what the story is about, right? So she's got this terrible relationship with her 2 elder brothers and then with her mother too, which at first, when you come into the story, seems kind of strange, but you realize that her mom has all of this emotional baggage with Seri. But, oh yeah, because we already said Seri's illegitimate, right? Seri's mother is not her actual bio mom.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives a wedge between them because Seri is kind of looking for a mother figure and her mother does not want to be that for her or can't be that for her.
Well,
at
and
the
also
beginning.
it's also playing into like the sort of chaebol tropes that show up in K-dramas a lot, where Seri is her father decides that she's going to be the one to inherit the Queen's Group Corporation. Something that
Because
is
she's a great businesswoman.
well, yeah, and her brothers are
Yeah.
idiots. But that then sets up this. They've had this adversarial relationship growing up, and that her mom, like, who we find out later, also has like a history of depression, and also has a husband who like cheats on her and was in jail. Like, there's a lot happening there, but like,
Yeah.
it's really so. I guess a content warning here. We're going to talk a little bit about depression and potentially
Yes.
about suicidal ideology. But Seri, when we meet her, she like is kicking ass and taking names. But we find out that like she previously had a lot of depression and was suicidal, in part because she felt like, and was correct to a degree, that her family didn't love her and didn't support her, and that she didn't have anyone.
Yeah.
So like when we have that contrast, that like comes out in bits and pieces over the course of the show, but like when we have her then in this perilous situation but with people that have her back
And love her, yeah. Or grow to love her, yeah.
I think that's part of why the show is so emotionally compelling, because it's taking it's like giving Seri a whole spectrum of kinds of love that she hasn't really had before.
That's true. Yeah. Because on one hand, they also kind of show Seri as like, okay, not that it's bad to be a serial dater, but that she kind of was, I'll date somebody for a second and then drop them because she wasn't building those kinds of connections, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of set Seri up as a person who did not have a lot of the variety of spectrum of love in her life, because she didn't really have friends either. She didn't have friends. She had bad relationships with her family. She had no found family, and she didn't have any romantic attachments either. So I think you're right on point with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I think Seri's relationship with her mother just really explained a lot about her personality and how she grew up, because the central trauma that Seri has is being abandoned by her mother at the beach. And that image just really haunts her, and I think really severs her relationship with her mother and her family. So she thinks that her mother hates her this whole time, but actually her mother was feeling really sorry that she did that, and it felt like her mother had a lot of guilt that later comes out. So yeah, I think Seri not feeling like she belongs in the family, feeling like her mother hates her, really makes her have like distance between herself and everyone around her.
Yeah.
And it's going to North Korea, this totally foreign place, that helps her reestablish those relationships
Yeah.
and that trust.
Mhm.
So yeah, I really see the that other kinds of family is crucial for Seri to begin loving her family again.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
loving
Yeah.
herself almost too, again, in
Right.
a way. So, yeah, thinking about that a little bit, and I hope this is related and not as tangential as it feels, but one of the things that we didn't really talk about, but that I liked a lot is that Seri is actually in her 30s, right? When we're
Mhm.
watching the show. This isn't a story about high schoolers. This isn't a story about people in their early 20s. And the fact that Seri goes through so much change and growth and development in her 30s, I think is kind of extra compelling in a way, in that, she's in some ways her life is figured out, right? She's a businesswoman. She makes so much money. You know what I mean? She wears fabulous clothes. Her earrings are stellar.
Yes.
but even, and I guess this is partially heartening for me too, because I'm in my 30s, right? But it's kind of like there's still so much growth and there's still so much development that we have to do as people and as human beings. And you can still heal and grow and revitalize relationships, rebuild relationships. Like, her life isn't quote unquote over because she's not 25 anymore. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's not quite family. It's more thinking about Seti herself. But yeah, I think she's just such a compelling heroine, because of all of the different things that she's gone through, because of where she starts at the beginning of the story, and where we find her, after everything is all said and done.
So that then maybe seems like a good moment to give a spoiler warning, but to talk
Ah,
about the end and like where we leave our main couples.
yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
spoiler warning, here it is. If you have not watched episode 16 of Crash Landing on You, or I mean, to be fair, if you haven't watched through like episode 14 or 15, you should probably pause
Proceed
here.
with caution.
Yeah,
Yes.
go watch them and then come back. Yeah. Oh, this ending episode. 2 hours long, by the way. Like, it
Yeah.
didn't it doesn't feel like 2 hours when you're watching it, but then you look at the clock and it's like, oh, oops, I have spent a lot of time watching this finale of this K-drama. But it was it was a lot. It was a lot. Even watching it the second time, like, I was crying, even knowing what was happening or what was going to happen. It's definitely an ending that I would describe as bittersweet because of some of the things that happen and some of the things that don't happen. Where do we want to start with this one, y'all?
Maybe let's start with our B couple, and then we can get to our A couple and where we leave everyone. But oh my god, guys, I was so upset when Gu Sung Jun died. I was so I was devastated.
So,
Yes.
for a little context, Donna's kidnapped, right? If I'm remembering correctly. You guys did a rewatch more thoroughly
Yeah,
than I
she
did,
was.
but she's kidnapped, and then good old Alberto goes to save her.
Well, she's kidnapped
And
specifically as bait.
as bait for him, right?
Mhm.
And in the process of saving her with a shotgun, right?
Yes.
He gets shot a couple times in some pretty vital places. And though they are able to get to an ambulance, he dies in the ambulance holding her hand. And
Yeah.
just, sharing their love for each other in not very it was weird because it was very evocative based on what has happened to them throughout the storyline, but it's not like they were gushing and being like, I love you so much, I love you forever till the end of time. Like, it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't melodramatic.
Well, and I think part of what makes their relationship work for me, but also what makes it so devastating, is they don't necessarily have a relationship. Like, he's basically said, I need to leave. I need to get right with myself. I need to be a better person. And if I do and come back, like, will you give me a chance? And that is left hanging when she drops him off at the airport, and then like she gets kidnapped, and then like she tells him right before he dies that she had been planning on waiting for him and giving him a chance, and that he dies before that can happen, and that Dan, who has spent a decade longing for this man who didn't love her, to find someone who does, for him to die, it's just like a lot.
So I'm legit feeling the tears in my eyes right now. So like,
yeah, I just felt so bad for her. Yeah.
And he gave her an engagement ring too, right?
I mean, yeah, and to be fair, I didn't really like that part because he gave her the same ring that he gave Seri. So,
where's he supposed to get another ring?
Don't you have a lot of money? Can't you just buy it from another black market? But that aside, I really felt bad for Gu Seung-jun, and I really liked him at the ending because he was the one that pretty much sabotaged everyone he knew. He was a fraud, he tricked people and he made a living by doing that. I mean, he had to do that because he had a personal vendetta against Seri, because, his family was a rival company. And then I believe Seri's family took all the money away from his company, his family. And yeah, so he was also an orphan, which is interesting. But he really, gave that up, and he sacrificed his own life and his well-being. And he was just about to get on a plane when, he gets a call about Dan. So yeah, I just felt bad that he finally sacrificed himself and thought about, someone else, and then he dies in the process.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of feelings.
So I do think, thinking about this show and the stakes, because I was wildly upset when Alberto died, and I'm still mad about it. But I do also think someone had to die. Otherwise the stakes weren't real. Like someone besides the villain had to die in this show. Otherwise, like, it's like you're just playing with house money, I feel like. But like,
true.
Yeah, I don't know. So like, I guess I narratively understand why they killed him off, but also I'm still mad about it.
Yeah. And what's interesting about it is that as the episode is wrapping up, Don's mother calls a fortune teller who has been shown to be pretty spot on throughout the show. But the fortune teller, who is possessed by a ghost, a virgin ghost, mind you, which is another trope, right? In K-dramas a lot are virgin ghosts.
Virgin ghosts are so much.
Yeah.
So the virgin ghost tells Don's mother that Don has met the love of her life, but they've gone their separate ways. And while she will never have a love again, she will be a successful and happy woman. So how did we feel about that ending? That we're ending a romance story with a woman who's going off to become the greatest cellist that was a cello, right? She's a cellist? Yes. The greatest cellist that North Korea has ever seen.
I think it was kind of brave of the drama to not give her a happy ending. Well, I mean, to not give her a happy ending, because like if they're gonna kill off Alberto, sticking someone in there, I think wouldn't have rung true for me.
Yeah.
Also, like, really quickly, one of the things I do love about Dan is she's like not eating and deeply depressed and like sad and won't leave her bed after Alberto dies. But the thing that gets her out of bed is revenge.
Yes.
Like, that is one of my, like, Dan is like a stone cold bitch when she needs to be. So like when her parents are like, what can we get you? Revenge. That is what I want. Like, I do also kind of love that about her, that she doesn't have to be just like warm and happy, and she is kind of a foil to Seri in that way. Both throughout the story, but also I think in their endings, like they complement each other.
Yeah. And I think one of the things they're doing with Don's ending is also complicating the idea of a happy ending, right? Because while Don in this moment is perhaps going through one of the hardest things she's ever done in her life, my God, her going to all the places that they had been together and reliving those moments and crying, But if we believe the fortune teller, she has a lifetime of success and happiness coming to her. So perhaps her ending is ultimately happy, just not a quote unquote happy ending as perhaps we would be led to expect in a romance. So I think that's an interesting kind of twist.
Yeah, and I like how the fortune teller, and I don't know if the translation is different for English, but she says with that amount of success, she don't need no man.
Yes.
So
I did translate that right.
It's like she does not need a man. She has her career, she has success, and for a woman in her 30s, it might feel like she's at that age, to get married and all of that. Her biological clock is ticking, whatever that means. But yeah, I like how she just is okay by herself, and she's able to just be successful and go places, travel, and do what she wants. So yeah, I also like the ending about that.
Yeah. So they like ripped our hearts out by killing Alberto, then send us over and over again through different parts of their relationship through flashbacks. But she's gonna be okay. We might not emotionally be okay, but Don will.
Yeah.
So why don't we, as kind of a way to close out our Chloe conversation, think about where our A couple ends up? Because one thing we actually did not talk a lot about is Switzerland and how Switzerland acts as this connecting point for the two of them, and also allows them to have a happier ending than perhaps any of us foresaw. Or maybe some of us foresaw. I don't know. I will say, as another caveat, Andrew thought the Switzerland connection was a little bit hokey, but I think I was so wrapped up in everything already that I was just like, they love each other, I don't care. So the way things end for us after a scare with Seri, because she's been shot and, has to recover from that. Oh, actually, hold on. Let me not go too far here. The ducklings, including our additional spy duckling, and Hyeok have snuck to South Korea, right? To protect Seri from the big bad who has come to kill her for revenge and other
political
reasons.
gain.
And political gain, yeah. But they get caught. So they're caught by, it's NIS, the Korean NIS, and they're going to send them home. They give them the option to stay, but all of these men have lives and family, and in an interesting twist, I think are playing on what we as audiences might think they want because of the experiences that they've now had in South Korea, but everyone wants to go home. So there is kind of a big exchange that's arranged. These 6 men are going to be exchanged for 9 men that North Korea is holding. And there's going to be a big exchange at the demarcation line?
Demilitarized zone?
Yeah, the demilitarized zone between the two nations. And that scene is a lot. Woof. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just to set up the scene a little bit. Seri has been in a coma essentially because she gets shot. Medical things happen, and Ri Jung-hyuk has been lying to try and take the fall. And then the last thing that they said to each other before she passed out was like, he said that he didn't love her and that it was all a ruse. And then she passes out and then almost dies. Also, I'm just going to say that ending episode 15 with someone flatlining but not telling us who was extremely rude, and I don't appreciate it.
The stress.
But she wakes up, and when she wakes up, it has been arranged that the North Korean men are going back to North Korea. But as this show does so well with borders, that is visually and thematically and in the plot, but like they have this goodbye where Seri gets there almost too late to say goodbye to Ri Jung-hyuk, and he crosses the border. So after he's been like exchanged and they're putting handcuffs on him, she like runs up and and doesn't want him to go because she thinks he's gonna die.
Oh God.
And then he like is concerned about her because she's running, and she just had like was in septic shock, and then they have this goodbye that is like, I think, the most heart-wrenching scene I've ever seen not just in Korean dramas, but like in a television show. You were going to say something, Ayani.
Oh, no. You know what's funny is I know she was in septic shock, but I thought he was telling her not to run so that nobody shot her for running towards the demilitarized zone. Because this is a really tense exchange that's happening.
That's also probably a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Because she's running and then the guns come out and it's like, oh, they gonna shoot Seri. And yeah, again. So, but continue. I agree, though, that it was... I cry about everything, right? But like in particular, this was a really intense kind of moment of television.
Yeah, and I do like how you mentioned borders, Corinne, because this is the second time that he crossed the border. Because the first time we have him crossing when he's sending Seri to South Korea, and then he says that he can't go with her, but then he ends up crossing, and then they have that kiss scene, which was magical. So yeah, I like how they have all this built up tension, and then at the last second she shows up and he crosses the border, which is a metaphor for him, just crossing the borders, that every obstacle that separates them too. And then they're hugging and everyone's holding guns up,
Yep.
And so it's just like us. It felt almost funny to me. I was crying, but it was also funny how they were hugging, but then everybody's holding their guns up, but they're all just watching them hug. And so I don't know, it was like this weird like audience, but also you're sad for them, but also you're glad that they're going to go back home. So the drama just really plays with these mixed emotions and the high stakes in that way. That's so intricate.
Well, and I think maybe another of the themes we've kind of talked about that is dealt with here is like the question of missing someone, and like what like Seri like asks him, playing on previous conversations they have, like what do I do when I miss you so much, like what do I do, like I'm never gonna see you again forever. And he's like, his response, and again going off subtitle, just wait and pray desperately, like you asked me if you can see someone you missed that way, you can. And then he leaves, and she just has to wait for years to see if she'll see him again. Yeah,
and he does do all of the little things though.
Yes,
because he like makes notes for her. He fills up her refrigerator and her cabinets with food. And the sweetest thing is him recording those texts to her.
Oh my God.
Like that just really got me, because I guess just me being in a long distance relationship for over 4 years now, but it's just like the little things that really keep you going, So I feel like that part I was full on team Lee Jung-hyuk at that point.
Yeah, 100%. And then the kind of catharsis of them finally finding each other again in Switzerland it's huge, because I think so much of the series is setting up the fact that this is an impossible relationship, and there's no way that they can be together in the way that I think the audience wants them to be together. But the fact that they kind of develop this system, right, in which Seri sets up, she dupes one of her older brothers, who is the sweeter of the silly older brothers, right? He's not the main asshole. We go to like him a little bit more, right? They're two companies, Seri's Choice and then the company that I guess her father used to run, open or start a foundation for young musicians. So, and then every year in Switzerland, right, they do a big show and performance. So that's Seri's excuse to kind of advertise through certain channels that she will be in Switzerland, right? And then also try to find a way to get Lee Jung-hyuk there, because he is a pianist and is returning to the piano after his military service. So when they finally find each other again and set up this system where for 2 weeks every year they're together in Switzerland, like I was just tears everywhere, because it's so much more than I thought could be possible for the two of them. But because of how much they love each other, I know it's not enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know how to wrap my brain around only seeing the person that you love the most in the world for 2 weeks out of the year. You know what I mean? Like, emotionally speaking, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I might have just moved to Switzerland and never left. But what do you guys think about that? Let me not spill all of my emotions all over the podcast.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree that I would not be able to just see the person for 2 weeks. And yeah, I feel like, she could have easily moved to Switzerland, I guess, with all her money and all the resources that she has. But I also liked Switzerland, even though it was kind of cheesy and it being a place of peace and neutrality. I liked how they didn't end it in either North or South Korea.
Yeah.
That they chose somewhere outside, because I think that it would have been too much at stake to end it here or there. And I think the whole point of the drama was to not to say that North or South is better, but that they each have their unique charm and unique communities and people. So that's kind of why I like the Switzerland. And going off on that, also the demilitarized zone, I was just curious if that was the real demilitarized zone. And apparently they just recreated it in Jeju-do, which is an island off of the coast of South Korea.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, so I thought that was also really interesting because they're recreating this space that has so much tension and that's in between North and South, but it's away from the actual continent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought they were using space in a really interesting way.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point.
So
Did you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of one thing that I was thinking about last night after we had sort of planned out the podcast is like one of the things that I am very skeptical of in sort of like activism, and something that we were skeptical of in our Bridgerton podcast is like love as the answer to problems. And I think something that I think is really moving to me about this drama is it's not necessarily saying that love is the answer to problems, but love is the reason why we want to solve them. Like why we should want to solve like this political conflict, why we should want people to have like found family, like love is the motivation for solutions to these impossible problems, even when they are so impossible. And like, even though this is like a, like a silly melodrama in some ways, it also like makes me it made me think about like North Korea and South Korea and that conflict more than I'd ever thought about it before, as just, a crazy Texan person living in Florida. Because like that was something that was far away from me. But like this fictional love story that's not just about like Yoon Seri and Hyeok, but also about like the love she had for the ducklings and the love they had for her and the North Korean market ladies. Like that love is a reason why we should, I don't know, let people live their lives together. That's super, super cheesy, but that's kind of where it left me.
No, I mean, there were, I think, nods and notes to that throughout the series, even not thinking about our main characters, because we have the house, right, that they stop at in the demilitarized zone that you can see there's pictures of someone's son all over the place, and the bowl that set out to catch water. I think it was for ritualistic purposes. So there was this life that was kind of uprooted and destroyed by the war. And then there's the commentary about family reunification as something they're trying to use as a bartering chip when they're sending Hyeok and the ducklings back to North Korea. So I think there is this kind of conversation of like love, family, found family, friends. These are the reasons why we should do these things. Not the reason that things are fixed, right?
But it's the reason why they matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in my feelings, and that feels like a good place to kind of close out our podcast today. This has been, I feel like, a super lovely conversation. Minji, thank you so much for joining us on this roller coaster of an episode. Why don't you go ahead and let the people know where they can find you? on
Yeah,
these
so
internets.
sure. So thank you so much for having me again. I had a really fun time, and all
Yay.
my feelings are definitely there right now. But yeah, you can definitely find me. I have a website, www.communityfoodwaves.com, and also Instagram at Community Food Waves, and Facebook Community Food Waves as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so everybody
Excellent.
definitely go find Minji, and you can find us at Sex Love Lit on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yeah, I don't think we know what we're talking about next time. Did we decide?
No. We'll
So
figure it
it's
out.
going to
So
be a mystery.
find us and let us know what you think we should talk
Mystery.
about.
Excellent.
Okay.
So this has been Sex Love Literature. I hope you guys had as much fun as we did, and we will see you in March.
Bye.
Yay!
Bye.